Good morning. How are you? Good. Yeah, it's beautiful spring in Minnesota. As always happens, I plan exactly what I want to talk about, and then in the 15 minutes beforehand, I'm like, oh, maybe we should talk about this. Maybe we should do this. But we'll figure this out as we go, and lots of room to talk and ask questions along the way. Some of you maybe know the storytelling project I have called A Piece of My Mind, that kind of piece. I've been doing it for 17 years. It's rooted in this notion that in a divided world, we can use photography and art and storytelling to remember what connects us. Part of that, during the pandemic, my wife and I sold our house in Bloomington. We bought that van and named him Vinny, Vinny Van Gogh. And I know. Yeah, welcome to my world. It's okay to play a little bit. And we spent 2.5 years on the road, living full-time, traveling around the country. We drove 93,000 miles, so if you're good at math, you know that's not a straight line. We sort of bounced around. On purpose, going to a lot of our tension points, going to the border to talk about immigration, going to Mississippi to talk about race, going to Skid Row to talk about housing security, but always with the belief that we could find people who are finding creative solutions to some of these really challenging issues. You know, we are less interested in the folks who throw up their hands and say, oh my gosh, the world's a mess, although it is, and more interested in the people who say, all right, let's get to work and figure this out. And so that was the process. And to answer your two unspoken questions, no, there was not a shower, and yes, Karen and I are still married. So just to lay the groundwork there. We made a book out of this, and when I was trying to figure out the foreword, you know, the thing where somebody usually writes a little thing that says, this is a really important book and this is why you should read it, I just wanted poetry. I wanted something that was a little softer and gentler. Does anybody know the name Pádraig Ó Tuama? He's a Northern Irish poet, and he talks about reconciliation in that place. And he has this poem called The Facts of Life, and he's a friend of mine. We've taught together at Holden Village. You all know about Holden? It's like Lutheran Disney World out there. It's so I've taught on staff there a few times, and Pádraig was on staff at the same time. So now every time I go to Belfast, like I'll be doing next month, I get to stay at Pádraig's place, because he's never there. He's always out traveling, but he gives me the key, and I get to stay. And he also let me use this poem for the opening of the book, which I think also sets a great tone for this conversation, The Facts of Life. And although I won't read it in his lovely Irish accent, I will read it to you now. The facts of life, that you were born and you will die, that you will sometimes love enough and sometimes not, that you will lie, if only to yourself, that you will get tired, that you will learn most from the situations you did not choose, that there will be some things that move you more than you can say, that you will live, that you must be loved, that you will avoid questions most urgently in need of your attention, that you began as the fusion of a sperm and an egg of two people who once were strangers and may well still be, that life isn't fair, that life is sometimes good and sometimes even better than good, that life is often not so good, that life is real, and if you can survive it, well, survive it well, with love and art and meaning. Sometimes when I get tired, I also get emotional. And meaning given where meaning's scarce. That you will learn to live with regret, that you will learn to live with respect. That the structures that constrict you may not be permanently constricting. That you'll probably be okay. That you must accept change before you die, but you'll die anyway. So you might as well live, and you might as well love. You might as well love. You might as well love. So I think especially for me, when when we deal with some of the messiness of conversations around addiction and recovery, rooting it in that honest understanding of what life is, that it's sometimes hard, but it's oftentimes beautiful. And that understanding that in the midst of it, maybe love is what carries us through. That just feels like a really good place to start for me. What I want to do with you this morning is share a few stories of a few people who I've encountered. So you've seen the portraits that are on the walls here, these brief 25-word responses to the question, what has moved you towards healing? Question we did yesterday at the forum and or at the conference, and if you've been in church, you'll see it. If you haven't been in church, but you're coming to 11, you'll see it. The 30 people who shared stories, which I have to say, that was probably a good percentage of the people who were in the room. And we never get 50% of the people that are in the room. So that was a really good showing of the people who were there. But in addition to those short form stories, we also do these long form stories where we sit down, we have an hour-long conversation. We share them out as podcasts, we share them on our website as a way to explore some of the issues around addiction and recovery. Like I said in church, I'm not a clinician, but I think sometimes an artist's view can help us see new things and help us see familiar things in new ways. So this is Dan Brandt. I've interviewed people who hit a rock bottom and went to prison, or were clinically dead and had to be resuscitated, who've been through recovery tens and dozens of times, but also people who've just decided, you know what, maybe I would be a little bit healthier if I didn't do this, who just wanted to make a change. And Dan is one of those people, and he talked about how, the world felt hard, and whatever anxieties he was dealing with, he coped with it through alcohol, and eventually that grew bigger in his life. And he tried a few times to quit, and finally found his way to sobriety. He said that there was a saying that he leaned on in his path to sobriety, which was just keep your side of the street tidy. There are a lot of things in life that you can't control, but you can control keeping your side of the street tidy. And so I'd encourage you to think about that a little bit in your lives. Well, let me also say at the beginning, if you have dealt with addiction in your life or recovery in your life, then you qualify to be here. If you know somebody who has, you qualify to be here. If you've got no experience with it whatsoever, you qualify to be here. So these conversations, this notion of what do you do to keep your side of the street tidy, if addiction's not part of your world, if recovery's not part of your world, there's probably still a way you can answer that. So all of these things apply in all of the places. Okay, I'm going to see if I can figure out the tech here to make a video. No, I think I got it. I think I'm okay. I just questioned myself. I'm a Mac guy. One of the things we did with this series is we went to women's Shakopee Women's Prison to deal with their addiction and recovery program there. Had 70 women in the program, and I went 3 times. The first time just to talk initially about the project, second time to invite their participation to do a studio, and the third time to share their stories back to them. And I have to say, in all of the years I've been doing this, I don't think I've experienced gratitude as much as I did in that space with people who've been really silenced and marginalized, who said, thanks for listening to our voice, right? Thank you for believing we had something that was worth listening to. And we tried something a little different with this video that I'll play for you now, and hopefully the volume's okay. We shot some video portraits of them with them just looking at the camera, not saying the words, but then we separately recorded the audio of them saying their words so you can hear their voice. And a lot of them said, again, our voices have been silenced in different ways, so thanks for letting us be heard. And I just want to play that with you now, and then we'll talk about that a little bit. As you watch it, think of this. The most frequent comment I heard from the women was, thank God I landed in this place so that I could finally take time to address the traumas in my life. Right? Life comes at you hard and fast, and sometimes if you're struggling, there's not the space to do it. And finally, for a lot of these women, they have the space to reflect and process and heal a little bit from the traumas in their life. So let's see if I get this right.
Being seen opened my wounds to allow me to take accountability, confront the pain I caused, and allow me the chance to heal.
My steps are concrete in lives. My next move will create roses. Break the cycle, allow growth. Success is always an option.
I had to humble myself and surrender my trauma wounds so I could truly do the hard heart work and finally see the beauty in my scars.
We can get through this. It won't be painless, it won't be quick, but God will use this mess for good. A garden of acceptance turns our wounds into wisdom.
To live by the 7 grandfather teachings: honesty, truth, humility, love, wisdom, courage, and respect. It begins with me.
God put me here so that I know that my hopes and dreams wouldn't go unanswered.
I realized if I didn't leave my past behind, it would destroy my future. I now live for what today has to offer, not for what yesterday took from me.
I can't go back and change the beginning, but I can start where I'm at and change the ending. Old ways won't open new doors.
In the wake of my attempted suicide, I found out that I am stronger and smarter than I believed I was.
I didn't like the person I turned into. That person scared me. I became a monster. I don't want to be that person, that monster anymore. I decided to step out on faith and do it afraid.
I found healing, keeping my mental a priority, and growing through my pain while letting my higher power be my guidance.
What helps me move towards healing is letting go of resentments and being able to forgive others, but most importantly, forgive myself.
Dealing with my core hurts, peeling back the trauma and addiction helped me change my thought patterns and plant the seeds of healing.
The obliteration of a mask I've worn for the world since childhood, forcing me on a journey towards myself, the me I was created to be and needed to love.
Knowing and loving my true self, not holding on to things that prevent me to be lovable, important, valuable, and empowered. Nothing or no one can take my birthright. Therefore, I live.
I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that. What'd you see? What resonated? What did you notice? Oh, that's not what I want to do. There we go. All right. Any thoughts?
Oh, just regular people. I mean, it's not like they're different.
Yeah.
They have different experiences.
Right, right. What did you say?
Healing.
Healing.
Finally feeling some peace. They're on the mend.
They're on the mend. Yeah, yeah. And I think the biggest question for me always in these moments of struggle or these moments of difficulty is what's next, right? Stuff happens. Stuff has happened. But for all of the people that I encounter in this process, that's not the end of the story. So what's next? It's interesting. I had a video guy come and help. I don't shoot a lot of video, and so Razik was along. We're going to add him to staff because we just got a grant that's going to allow that. So we can tell our stories in some other ways. But at the end of the day, I walked out with Razik. It was the first time he'd ever been in a prison setting. I'm like, what did you think? He goes, I don't even have words for it. He goes, it was hard to square up the people I met with the sentences that they received. You know, a lot of the times we would be talking to the women for 10 minutes, 20, 30, 40 minutes. we had no idea why they were there. We didn't have to deal with them as who they were sentenced as. But by the end of it, a lot of times they would just volunteer and they would share what it was. And it's, yeah, I think I said it in the sermon, you know, we are not the worst thing we've ever done. And there is a way to move forward. What else did you notice in it? Yeah.
I think the majority of people touched on the fact that they're learning to love themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, that sort of shame and that self-loathing that happens in this loop of really bad things. And that, I mean, that looks extreme for some people and it looks much gentler for others, but when you're experiencing it yourself, it doesn't matter if it's a big thing or a small thing. It's not a competition. It's a real thing to us. Was there another hand back there? Yeah, Mike.
The acknowledgement of God's presence and God's action, especially in the mess. They, you know, created, inflicted, put upon them, whatever. A sense of God's presence even in that mess.
Yeah, maybe especially in that mess. Yeah, that one woman who shared the quote I love, God will use this mess for good. You know, and I think that's the other thing that I love is how often people take this difficult thing that they've gone through and they want to use it to help others. You know, everybody who stopped by the studio, I try to make sure people understand we use these stories publicly, right? The whole goal is to use them out in the world so that we can foster conversations. That being said, there were two people who were in this exhibit who were also here for the program yesterday. And I always get a little nervous. I'm like, oh, what does that feel like for them to have their story up on the wall? Because that could be vulnerable, but man, it could also be a source of pride. And these people were really excited that their story might be used to help flip the situation for someone else so that they didn't have to do, you know, go through what they went through. Yeah. Yeah.
This may sound like a weird question, but did you get the sense that incarceration almost provided protection for them to begin recovery?
Yeah, 100% I got that sense. And that had not occurred to me when I went there. So there's something as Minnesotans that I think we should feel pretty proud of because I think, I don't know, but I think if I went to a prison in Louisiana, it might be a really different experience for the people who are in there. You know, I know the warden at Shakopee, so that was a pretty easy in. But she said they have the ability to move people around if they need mental health resources or something that they need. And there was one particular prisoner who had one particular need. So they went online and they Googled, well, what's the best prison system in the nation where this person could get the services? And then they went, oh, it's Minnesota. Like we are leading. I have my own preconceptions about the world, and I sort of had a negative view of the prison as a place to warehouse people who did bad things and then, you know, set them loose on their own. In fact, what I saw was this really intentional process to bring people towards healing, to give them the resources they need, to give them the time that they need where they've never had that opportunity before in their life, to get some footing and to get some skills and to do some self-reflection. I mean, if the notion of a prison system is to rehabilitate, I think we're not great. There's always room to improve, but I think in Minnesota we're doing pretty good. So I think we can feel proud about that. And 100% people said, yeah, this is a place where I finally got to address some of these things in my life. Yeah.
Did they develop a sense of community together, that group of people that you talked to?
Yeah, you could definitely see relationships. As we photographed them, they would come into the visitors' room sort of 3 at a time. I mean, but they've all been there quite a while and they've got relationships. But I think through this process too, and I don't know, but maybe in the studio process, I think this happens all the time. People come individually with their stories and it's a pretty quick process. But then when they see them all reflected back, they see themselves as a part of a bigger whole. And we did see some of that. You know, when I shared their video back to them in the prison, we were in the gymnasium and they've got a big screen in there. And there were, you know, holding hands and there were tears and there were hugs afterwards. And when people's picture would come up, you'd see little nudges and little little nods and smiles. And as a photographer, I love to watch the people watch themselves, because you can see those little sparks and those little connections that are happening. So, yeah.
I don't know if I'm gonna say this right, but okay, so all of those people obviously came to a point in their lives where they had to come to reckonings with what they did, and they got into the situation where they're in shock.
Mm-hmm.
How about the people that have not come to that yet, that haven't been confronted with something as dramatic as being sent to prison or having to deal with that, but still they know they got a problem, but they still aren't willing to address it? Is there anything that can be done to kind of help?
Yeah. So if you couldn't hear the question, these folks ran into some really significant barriers in their life, and they had the aha moment, right? And sometimes that happens for someone if they overdose, or it happens when their marriage breaks up, or they wake up in a cell. But a lot of times people, it's not a black or a white thing. There's all of this gray level of differentiation. So where do those people have their impetus to shift? And I mean, I think that's my story, because I don't know what the definition of alcoholic is. It probably is different for different people. I got to a point where I felt like I was probably drinking more than I should. And I did not have the wake up in the gutter. I didn't have the I missed work or I blew this relationship. That didn't happen to me. But what happened is I started having this growing sense that I could do better, right? I was not nice to my wife, a couple times. I said things, I'm like, man, I was a jerk. And I don't want to be a jerk to this person who I love. And so there were those little moments, and I thought it was a little fuzzy for a while. I'm like, well, maybe I'll slow down. Well, slowing down didn't really work. Well, maybe I'll just have a drink on weekends. Well, that didn't really work. And it just became clear to me, maybe I'd be better off without it. And when I did it, it was sort of as a practice. I'm like, let me go a month and see what that feels like. And I got to the end of the month, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty nice. I think I lost a little weight. I think I slept a little better. It was easier to get out of bed. And I'm like, well, I hit a month, maybe I could hit a year. And I hit a year, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll have a glass of wine. Maybe I have proven to myself that I'm in charge, and I'll just have a glass of wine while I'm editing that book. And I had that glass of wine, and I'm like, no, actually, I think I'm done. Because I thought, well, maybe I'll have a second glass of wine. I didn't, but I'm like, oh, I see where this is going. And for me, abstinence was easier than moderation. And so it became, it was hard to know when is the day, right? Because I didn't have that rock bottom moment.
How the individual I'm thinking of hasn't come to that point, and was abused in younger years and all this type of thing. And so he's had a hard life, mother abandoned him, all that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but he knows he's got a problem. He's really, really got a problem. But how does a person, I know they've got to recognize the point when they're ready to go, when they make the change. But is there anything that can be done besides just listening, besides just being there, to kind of get them to make that big leap?
Yeah, boy, if anybody has the secret answer to that, let us know. But I think the answer, and here's where we're going to jump way around to these stories and see if I can get to the one that I'm thinking of. Come on. Oh, boy. Hang on. No, I'm almost there. No. There we go. Rendell. Rendell was addicted to alcohol for 30 years, and he was addicted to opioids for a few years. And for a long, long time, people are like, you should get help. And he's like, yeah, I know I should get help. But he wasn't ready to grab onto that lifeline. And the short answer is, I don't think there is a secret thing that you can do to get a person across the line. I think there are interventions, there are confrontations, there are things like that. And for some people that might work, for some people it might not. But here's what I find really interesting about Rendell's story is he said people kept throwing him lifelines, and he was not ready to grab it. And he doesn't know what shifted, but one day it was enough. And he said, thank God someone was still throwing me lifelines because I could grab on. And I know from your chair and anybody who's dealing with this from the outside, how frustrating that could be when you're looking at this going, ooh, boy, if you would just get some help. There's a lot of potential here. There's a lot of possibility here. And how frustrating it is when they won't grab onto that lifeline. But I think the important thing to remember is that if we keep throwing it out, one day it might be the right time. And what a shame if they're ready and that's the day someone doesn't offer it. And so it requires an extraordinary amount of patience. It requires an extraordinary amount of love. It requires some degree of self-preservation. You need to understand that it does need to be that person's choice, and it's not your obligation or burden or whatever, but it's okay to keep caring, and it's okay to keep offering. Yeah.
I pray for him all the time, and I have gotten to the point of praying that he will see the light.
Mm-hmm.
Because just a little bit, if he can. And he's just so sick, with this disease, that it's really got the upper hand on him. And, so I'm hopeful for him, but I know a lot about this kind of stuff too, from like a lot of us do. And you can't, you keep that door open, and he knows it's open, but.
And maybe he'll get, yeah. Yeah, we're people of God. We're supposed to believe that makes a difference. So keep doing it, and keep offering that opportunity, because maybe one day he'll get through the door, and then maybe he'll backpedal, and then maybe he'll get through the door again. I've met people and interviewed people where it's been 10 times and 15 times and 20 times. People who've OD'd 5 times. I'm like, you don't think that first dose of Narcan was a wake-up call to say maybe don't do that anymore? It's not, there is some underlying trauma. There's extraordinary shame. I had one guy I interviewed here, and now I'm going to go backwards and see how well I do with that. Hold on. Here we go. This is Michael. And Michael said that, so Michael was homeless. Michael was a heroin addict. Michael burned every bridge known to him, in stealing from his friends and his family to get the next hit, because that was the only thing that mattered. He knew that wasn't right, but that next hit mattered more. And then he started burning all of these bridges, and then he felt shame. He finally woke up in a jail cell. It was an enforced recovery, an enforced detox. He said it was miserable, but he was in jail, and there was nothing he could do about it. He finally got clean, and when he was finally discharged, part of his discharge was to help people at a food bank. And he's like, man, I did not want to go to that food bank. But he showed up, and he was tall and he was big, and it was a lot of small church ladies who were running the food bank. And so if there was a heavy thing to lift or a tall thing off a shelf, they're like, Michael, can you grab that? And he started finding that he had some purpose. And slowly he started reclaiming some of that pride and some of that sense of belonging. And then he would be at the end of the line, and people would say, geez, thanks for doing this for me. And at first he said, well, I have to do it. It's part of my probation. And then it started feeling a little good. And he's like, whoa, maybe I'm not a horrible person. But, after 40 years of viewing yourself as a horrible person, of being told that you're a horrible person, of having the system put you in a cell because you're a horrible person, a little hard to reclaim that place as maybe an okay person, maybe a child of God. Maybe someone with some potential and hope in their lives. Now he runs the food bank. It's 400 families a week, and he's loving it. And he said, when you get sober, whether it's alcohol or whatever it is, he goes, at first, it feels pretty good. You're doing this thing. He goes, and all of a sudden, all of these problems that you had hidden from for your whole life start flying off the shelf at you, and you still got to deal with it. There's still bills you didn't pay. There's still broken relationships. There's still this and there's still that. That's when it gets really hard. You know, you made it through what you suppose is those first 30 days or 60 days of not touching whatever the thing was that was your problem. But then you got to deal with all of that residual stuff that you've been hiding from. He said that's where it gets really hard for him. That's where it's really important to have a support network around you. Why the recovery cafe stuff that you guys do is so important, because people can show up and they know that the first reaction to them is not judgment. People know that the first reaction to them is, all right, what's going on? How can we help? What needs to happen? Yeah.
It's heartwarming to hear the young people at Recovery Cafe
Hmm.
come in and be part of a group that plays pickleball down there. And they are very open, and if we sit down with them, they'll tell us right away what they did, how long they've been sober, and what their path is now toward being back in society as they should.
Yeah, I mean, it does us no good to hide from that, to hide from what's true and from what's real. I mean, I've been a church-going guy for my whole life, but I think someplace where the institutional church has failed historically is that feeling that when you walk in the door, you have to look a certain way and talk a certain thing and appear a certain story, and I think that doesn't help us. You know, I don't think that's fully honest and fully authentic, and I think we gotta, and people who are struggling, A, can see through it, and B, feel rejected by it. So the work you're doing with the Recovery Cafe, creating that space where people understand, okay, this is for me too. I mean, I'm not a theologian, but I'm pretty sure Jesus talked a little bit about healing, right? I'm pretty sure Jesus talked a little bit about redemption, and that tomorrow is a different day, and whatever's going on now, it can shift, and God's ready for that. Sometimes it seems like we're not. And so I think, you know, I love the movement I see in that direction. I think it's really beautiful. And the conversations and the sense of welcome that I saw yesterday for that conference were palpable. And I think people really appreciated that. So what else are you thinking about? Who has not yet been, this is not judgment, who's not yet been to church today? Anybody, have you all seen the video already? Do you want to see it again, or should I? Yeah? Yeah, yes. Okay, so, but this time I want feedback from you. I want you to talk about what you see. I want you to talk about, so I was sitting next to somebody, or talking with somebody today who said, oh, I didn't know that about that person, or I didn't know that they dealt with that. And this is how we get to know one another better. This is how we get a fuller sense of who we are and how we can find ways to support one another. So let me now go forward. Come on. I think we're close. Okay, here we go. Again, 5 minutes. say that thing again that you said to me back there?
A lot of people there were people that were part of the organizations that were here, probably 8 of them.
Yeah.
But this was their chance to express themselves.
Yeah, to express themselves and to make a difference, because I think, I don't know, I think more than anything else, when people have experienced pain, when people have felt pain, or seen it in others, you can't unsee that, right? It's a little bit like picking up sand dollars on the beach. At first you can't even see where they're at, but when you start seeing them, oh my gosh, all of a sudden you know what you're looking for and you can see it everywhere. And the question is, when you see that pain in the world around you, what are you going to do about it, right? There's something you could do. Yeah. Somebody also said, had a question at the back, who said, once people have gotten through this and found some healing, was there forgiveness in these broken relationships? And the answer, I think, is always yes, sometimes. And sometimes not. You can't control that part. You can offer forgiveness and you can control how you respond to it, but you can't control what comes back to you. And so sometimes those bridges are burned, and the people on the other end of it, they've got their own healing, they've got their own trauma, they've got their own issues. And so maybe that's never going to go back to the way it is, and that's okay. But I think there was a woman, Angela Bates, who I interviewed once, and her quote said, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond to it. And that calls back to Dan's statement, keep your side of the street tidy. But I think at the end of the day, that's true. We can control what we can control. And if you're struggling with some of this stuff and you find your way toward healing, that generally leads itself to forgiving others, trying to make amends. But if that doesn't come back to you, that doesn't have to derail you either, right? You can control what you can control. And I suppose the Bible also talks about grace and some of those things. Couple spots. We can lean into that. I think it's true. They put it in there for a reason. I think it's true. But we forget it in our day-to-day. What time are we supposed to quit?
About now.
Right about now. One last question. Anybody have any last questions? Let me say this. We have a podcast. It's kind of ongoing. If you listen to podcasts, you just search A Piece of My Mind, that kind of piece. And the header will be sober. Like, I have a lot of podcast series, but the one you're looking for is sober, SOBR, because SOBER was already .com was already claimed, but SOBR, and there are a whole bunch of these podcasts about people talking about their journey, and it has been enlightening for me to listen to it. If you're interested in diving in a little bit deeper, listen to that. And the Recovery Cafe, plug into what these folks are doing. It's good work. Yeah, so talk to your people. Plug in. There's good work to do. Thanks for this morning. Yeah, thank you.